All right, so we're finishing up with still time here. And remember, these are objects or people at rest. So this first image that we have is by Kristopher. And he's shooting this at ISO 100, f10 at 1/200th of a second. So pretty quick exposure, but everything's still. It could be a longer exposure. There's no movement happening here. So what makes this a still image? It's just a person sitting down. So why does it feel like this person's at rest? I think part of it is the light. The subject has light on their head from just the overhead light, and you're warming them up with this reflector. We can see it in the glasses coming up from underneath. And I think the warmth of sitting in the sun is a feeling of stillness that we can all grasp onto pretty easily. So I think that really helps us understand this as still time. I think that if the person was laying down or sitting down even, that would feel more at rest, right? If we could see that this person was sitting down. But I think the light really echoes this idea of rest, which is interesting to me that you're able to foster that feeling of stillness with the light. Here you have, you just must have had a great time photographing this guy. So he was skateboarding for you. You got some of those action shots, some of the movement shots. So it's good to see that you're not just out there and you get the one shot, but you're photographing him again and again and again until you get that one shot where he's up in the air and you're able to capture exactly what you want. Or here, maybe that's a little bit too much movement. This is too much movement, but here you were able to capture that he was on something and moving, and that is what you wanted. So it's great to see the practice that went into these. This image is by Bree. You're at ISO 1600, f16 at 1/13th of a second. So first I would bring down your ISO. It's really high at 1600. And with that high ISO, we can see the digital noise, how this isn't just smooth white, but we're seeing that digital noise. I would bring that down. Then you could open up your aperture. Instead of shooting it at f16, you could shoot it at f5.6 and probably maintain enough focus throughout this. And that would allow you to have a faster shutter speed so that you don't have to be so worried about having a higher ISO or anything. You could have a faster shutter speed just by opening up your aperture. So having the cat on the bed, sleeping, that obviously gives us the idea of rest. Something is not moving, it's going to stay there for a while. So I think the idea of showing us the stillness happens here. I'm curious why you chose to crop in on the cat. Why is it important that we see this empty space and the toy opposed to seeing the backside of the cat? I think it could work really well for you to get even closer, to just look up the cat from above and not let us see anything that's around. Just kind of see this, imagine this was shot from above and that you included the whole cat, but see an image where it's something like this, where the whole image is just taken up by the cat. Like this could give us a nice feeling of rest, right? If it was taken at a little bit of a different angle. Yeah, so of your images that you turned in, I think your panning image was your most successful as far as showing the type of time, having a little bit of a faster shutter speed here and a lower ISO here, I think would have made a difference technically. This image is by Eric. You're at ISO 250 and at 1/640th of a second. So we can see that this is a nice still image as far as everything in the background, but the dog's head's not in focus. The focus is behind the dog. So we're not seeing the sharp focus on the face that we'd like to see. The sharp focus is back here on the back legs and on the gravel underneath him or her. So that's an important point for you to get. You really need to get your subject as in focus as possible. And then also for this image, I think right now we're kind of waiting for the dog to turn its head, right? We're not seeing this as at rest. So if the dog was sleeping, if the dog was laying down, that would give a much more of a feeling of being at rest. So as we look through here, there's a lot of movement happening in all of these as far as the dog goes. So we see this could have been frozen time. I think you had talked about the idea of trying to get the dog to move around and trying to get him to jump off things. I think you had talked about that. Someone had talked about it in their description. So this is more action happening, more frozen time. These just kind of feel in between. They don't feel it as much frozen time, but you definitely got your extrusive time. This seems like this could have been a really fun image. Maybe it's a bus. If you would just move to get this car out of the way of the frame. And then this image is by Morgan. And Morgan, like I said, like this and the image of the girl throwing the flower, I think are just really strong images. So I think you conceptually are right on target with things. But both of these images aren't quite sharp. So here you're at 1/30th of a second. And as we get back to see her eye that has this beautiful catch light in it, we can see that there's some movement happening, that it's not quite sharp. So you either need to set up on a tripod for this image, or you need to increase your shutter speed. You could open up your aperture a little bit more. So instead of it at f7.1, you could shoot this at f5. That would be one stop of light. And then you could shoot it with a stop less exposure as far as the time goes. So that could be 1/60th of a second. Then you probably would have everything nice and sharp here. So continue to play around with that. I think what you've accomplished in this image visually and conceptually works really well. We just need to get that technical side down. And again, this, same as what we saw here, having a person that's not, we can't see if they're sitting, is difficult to show that they're necessarily at rest, but this does communicate that idea. Yeah, so just looking here, I'm just checking 1/30th of a second, 1/30th of a second. Yeah, I think you're gonna have to, for these, open up your aperture so you can have a faster shutter speed in order to capture that. Looks like this is, I think you had said you'd work with something besides flour. I forget what you had said, like chalk or something. But yeah, these are fun. It might be something for you to think about for your final project. I can show you, if you're interested, you can let me know. Dancers, there's a lot of pictures of dancers that work with chalk. And we could take a look at those to inspire you for your final project. And then this is the last image. This is by Joshua. You're at ISO 100 and 1/40th of a second. You're down low, you're getting closer to being on level with the dog. So that's working better. I think opening up your aperture so we don't have to see as much of what's going on in the background. Like we don't need to see the gaming or the plug in the background. Just seeing the dog, I think works great. And then if you get lower, you could show us even more of the dog being at rest, right? Where we're not looking down on it, but we're really like even lower than you are, like having your camera an inch from the ground, I think would work really well. But the idea of being at rest, even though its eyes are open and it's looking outside, it looks very peaceful and very much at rest. So you did a great job with that. So it looks like we pretty much are seeing exactly what you submitted, as far as there's no surprises here of different images. Here's a dog starting to move down. I think that might work better as far as frozen time, or here if the cat's jumping forward, that also might work better as frozen time.